They feel to me like two tourists wearing sandals wandering off into the woods in the North Shore of Vancouver saying, don't worry about us, we'll be fine. They don't know what they're talking about.
She isn't saying, who cares about those First Nations? She isn't saying, who cares about BC's LNG projects?
Yeah, I guess, you would do a great job writing speeches for Danielle Smith if she put it that way, but that's not what she's saying.
Vassy completely triggered BC Premier David Eby over his reluctance to work with Alberta. She also calls out his deliberate misinterpretation of Danielle Smith's goals and characterizes her advocacy for Alberta as a betrayal to British Columbia. There's a lot to go over in this video, but I've cut it down to the best segments for your convenience. Make sure you check down below if you're subscribed to my channel and hit the bell for notifications. Hit the like button to help my video reach more people in Canada, and let's have a discussion in the comments section below.
When it comes to the LNG projects that you mentioned, the first two that you said, if I recall, are the first two, it was the first project on the first major projects list and the first project on the second major projects list that just came out last week. So there's a ton of buy-in and support from the federal government for those resource projects in your province. Why are you, I guess, staking out the position you have right now when they have never said that they're going to do things to put those projects in jeopardy? In fact, they've put their support behind them.
Okay, well, first of all, you and I are speculating about the contents of the MOU, and I understand why you might be speculating. You're a member of the media. They haven't announced it yet. But I don't understand why I'm speculating about an MOU negotiated with Saskatchewan and Alberta about British Columbia and what the content of it might be. Somehow, Danielle Smith and Scott Moe know better than literally generations of politicians from all parties that have observed through practice and then recently through legislation a ban on oil tankers off this coast simply because it is so dangerous and so precarious, that Danielle Smith and Scott Moe know better. They feel to me like two tourists wearing sandals wandering off into the woods in the North Shore of Vancouver saying, don't worry about us, we'll be fine. They don't know what they're talking about. And not only that, there's not a real project here. The threat to those projects is the coastal First Nations saying, if you lift the tanker ban, we will no longer support these projects. We don't even like them in the first place, and the only reason we're tolerating them is because of the tanker ban. I don't know that anyone appears to get this from Alberta or Saskatchewan, or disappointingly, the PMO, if in fact these conversations are happening in the total absence of the coastal First Nations. They haven't been included either.
I totally take the point that you're making around not being at the table. And I can see how the way in which this is reported and the involvement of British Columbia without you not being there would be egregious to you. If I put that, and I get it, I'm not trying to counter that in any way. But if I put that aside for a second and I listen very closely to what Alberta's premier has said about this, she isn't saying, who cares about those First Nations? She isn't saying, who cares about BC's LNG projects? What I have mostly heard her say is, we hope that BC can exploit those natural resources to the benefit of British Columbians and Canadians. We just want the potential ability to do the same thing should the opportunity be viable. And we have not had, in her view, as I hear it, a federal government that even in principle was supportive of that. That isn't exactly the way that you're characterizing it. And I wonder why, the two of you, for example, cannot engage in a conversation at such a critical time for this country to find some kind of middle ground.
Yeah, I guess, you would do a great job writing speeches for Danielle Smith if she put it that way, but that's not what she's saying. She is saying that there are 9 bad laws or something like that in Canada, and that if they continue to exist, that they mean that Canada is broken and it is not functioning. And one of those bad laws is the oil tanker ban off of the coast of British Columbia. And she wants that ban removed. She wants that law rescinded without a single company, not even one. She hasn't even got one company that's willing to come forward and say, hey, Alberta is willing to underwrite this thing. The federal government's here. They got a bunch of money for us. They're gonna help us. If they're able to do these things, we would love to build that pipeline. And the reason there is no pipeline company willing to come forward and say this is because they don't want to build it. All we get is a $20 million PR exercise from a premier who's in political trouble, trying to remove an oil tanker ban off the coast of our province that is the foundation for more than 10,000 jobs and billions billions of dollars in economic activity for our province and for the entire country. And so that's the frustration that I have, and it will continue to be, and I'll continue to advocate on this because real project should always trump made-up project.
But when she talks about the tanker ban, with due respect, Premier, she is reflecting what those potential pipeline proponents have said, which is that if there is to be a pipeline, an additional pipeline beyond TMX, that tanker ban, in the case of that pipeline, essentially renders it null and void. I understand your point that it puts your projects in jeopardy, but so far those projects are going ahead. They are on the major projects list. Why is it okay for your province to profit from its natural resources and not for Alberta?
You know, I mean, Vassy, with respect to the question, the idea that Alberta has been frustrated in realizing access to market is bizarre. $30 billion in taxpayer dollars went to building the first pipeline that is now publicly owned, that's not even at full capacity and could be significantly expanded. And that's not enough for Alberta. You know, Alberta also wants billions of dollars for the Pathways plan project that's going to reduce carbon emissions. And why not $50 billion more for a second taxpayer-owned pipeline, because there is no private company that is willing to do that. And the entitlement, the belief that only Alberta should have access to that kind of money from the federal government and that kind of support and that kind of hand-holding, it is an entitlement that cannot continue. Alberta, just like every other province and territory in this country, we all have to work together. For our part in BC, that includes sucking it up and having a hard conversation about the TMX pipeline that's already publicly owned, that we fought tooth and nail, but we're willing to sit at the table with Alberta about. But the idea that BC has to take our private sector projects and put them at risk for nothing from Alberta. They have no project, no proponent, no route, no permits, no nothing. And we have to put all of our hard work that has been done over years with coastal First Nations and communities along the line, bringing people together to deliver this thing. And Danielle Smith can have a $20 million communications project in her province, and that somehow is more important than the actual projects that we worked years to deliver. Like, there just comes a time when we have to say enough is enough. Like, we don't ask for Danielle's support or her assistance in these projects, or her province's support or assistance in these all we ask is that they stay out of the way.
But the difference is geography, right? Like, your province is the coast, and that necessitates, if you are trying to export resources, involvement of British Columbia. And when you say, why is, you're intimating that essentially Alberta wants too much, that they are entitled by asking for additional pipeline export capacity. Would you be okay with just one LNG project, Premier? If someone said, no, you should just stop at LNG 1? I'm
trying to imagine a scenario where British Columbia and the federal government are having private meetings about Alberta and Saskatchewan in the absence of those provinces. I'm trying to imagine what the reaction would be. I understand the need to have conversations. I understand the need for Premier Smith to advocate for her province, and that's fine. But what I am saying, and I'm not sure I can be any clearer about it, is her advocacy around the oil tanker ban puts at risk real projects with private sector proponents that have all their approvals in place, that are approaching but have not yet reached final investment decision, because it jeopardizes the coalition of support and tolerance that we built for these projects in British Columbia.
Vassy bewilders me sometimes, I understand that CTV News is full of leftist morons, but from time to time, we get gems like this where Vassy actually does her job as a journalist. And I know I'm biased, but it's not just because she's grilling a leftist moron, it's because these interactions typically favor leftist narratives. Anyway, regardless, David Eby is acting like he knows what's best for BC and the Indigenous people of his province. Well, I don't think that people really put trust or faith in someone who says things like safe consumption sites will help reduce the number of drug overdoses in British Columbia, and then do a complete 180 and say that you made a mistake. Well, when your mistakes actually cost Canadian lives, I don't think that you genuinely have the best interest of your province in mind, even though you're trying to act like you really are. If a conservative commentator with less than 6,000 followers can ascertain that lifting the tanker ban and allowing a pipeline to the BC coast turns BC into a major export hub, delivering billions in investment, thousands of jobs, huge port revenue, cheaper fuel, Indigenous economic opportunities, and massive long-term tax benefits? Then why is it so hard for you to do? And why are you so gung-ho on demonizing your neighbors, idiot? I don't think that this is a matter of principle for David. I think this has more to do with David having a personal vendetta or grudge against Danielle Smith because he gets emotional when he talks about her and sounds phony when he's talking about British Columbian prosperity for projects that he basically begged for. He wants to be seen as the one who helps British Columbia with his own ideas. He doesn't like the thought of working with Danielle Smith because of her politics. It's really that simple. Otherwise, he wouldn't take cheap jabs about her being in political turmoil in Alberta. Everything is emotional with you, bro. And when you make decisions on behalf of over 5 million people based on emotions as opposed to common sense, then that's just intentional self-destruction. Why do you think that your approval rating has been steadily declining since March of this year? Is that what you're so desperate to fix right now? Because it's not going to work. You've given nothing but broken promises, insane deficits, job losses, housing issues, affordability crisis, and that's without even mentioning your tensions between the Indigenous community and your province. I think the time is coming for you to step down because you're a disgrace to the people of BC.